Hello, everyone. My name is Tao Xu, and I am a second-year postgraduate research student in the School of Tourism and Hospitality. So today, the topic that I'm going to present here is from a literature review that I conducted for my main thesis. The literature review is about the senior tourist studies published in the Chinese language. Well, so first of all, let's take a look at some of the background information. Some of you may have already learned from some news reports that there is a population aging trend going on in China in recent years. And China stepped into an aging society since 1999 when 10% of the country's total population aged above 60 years of age. And today, China has the largest senior population in the world of more than some 200 million. And according to some government authorities, that number was expected to grow beyond some 230 million by 2030. And this population aging trend, combined with a drastic economic growth for the decades, has created a massive senior tourist market. According to Yang, in 2016, more than 80% of the Chinese seniors expressed their demand to participate in leisure travel. And according to the figure provided by China Tourism Academy in 2018, more than 13 million middle-aged and senior Chinese citizens traveled abroad in last year in 2017. However, if you take a look at the English research literature in this field, you see that there is a lack of research studies focusing on the Chinese senior tourist market in the English research literature. And that brings up the purpose of this study. So I just want to know if Chinese researchers have ever conducted any research studies in the Chinese senior tourist market and what they have found. And also, I would like to see if there are any identifiable research gaps for my own research. And the aim and objectives of the research, the aim is pretty simple. That is to provide a comprehensive literature review for the research literature published in Chinese. And there are 4 main objectives. Objective 1 is to reflect how Chinese researchers define the senior tourist market in China. Such definition is very important because it helps the researchers to identify their target population and helps them with their sampling process. And objective 2 is to classify the research themes within the Chinese research literature. Objective 3 is to scrutinize those research themes and any methodological issues within the Chinese research literature. And objective 4 is to identify key gaps and offer some recommendations for future research. And as for the research methods, I utilized 3 Chinese databases, the CNKI databases, OneFound databases, and CQVIP databases. Those 3 databases are the major databases utilized by Chinese researchers for their literature reviews in relation to research studies within their own discipline. And I developed 5 keywords for the article search and collection process. These 5 keywords translated into English are respectively retiree tourism or retiree travel, senior tourism or senior travel, senior citizen tourism, senior citizen travel, senior tourism industry, and long stay tourism or second home tourism. So as a result of the data collection, I collected a total of some 354 articles. However, a quick examination of those articles told me that, well, not all of the articles are suitable for this literature review because a large proportion of the literature are in a essay format. So the arguments of the researchers were not supported by any empirical data, and therefore I have to identify those non-empirical articles and excluded them from the literature review. So the classifying of the literature identifies 241 non-empirical articles. That's 68% of the entire literature, and the rest of the 113 articles are included for the literature review. In terms of data analysis methods, I would use content analysis for analyzing the 113 articles. And then let's take a look at the results of the study. The result of the study is just a list of numbers and facts, and I'm going to present them in the following order. So first of all, let's take a look at how Chinese researchers defined their target population, or the senior tourist market in China. According to Satterstein and Mayer, 1997, there are 4 effective means to measure the aging process of the person, and these 4 effective means are namely the chronological age, biological age, social age, and psychological age. And as for the research literature collected by this study, most of the Chinese researchers utilized the chronological age because it is the most straightforward method for them to measure the aging process of Chinese people. The table on the right-hand side shows 4 examples of how Chinese researchers defined the Chinese senior tourist market. Some researchers like Ho, Ying, and Chen, 2005, utilized the definition put forward by the United Nations for an aging society to define the Chinese senior population and to define the senior tourist market. Some other researchers based their definitions on the official retirement ages in China. Liu, Feng, and Ma utilized this method, that is the official retirement age. And some researchers like Tang and Yang, 2009, utilized some social norms in remote areas of China. That's where they conducted their research to define their target market. And briefly speaking, those 4 examples did not reach an agreement of what a chronological age threshold for the senior population is. So they didn't reach a consistent definition for that. And interestingly, there are also a large number of articles failed to provide such definition. In order to find out how they define market, I conduct a frequency analysis on the minimum sampling ages of those of all the articles, and the result is shown in that table. Again, no agreement on what is a consistent definition for the senior tourist market, and the ages of 60, 55, and 50 years of age were the most popular chronological age definitions for the senior tourist market. Again, more than 30 articles failed to provide any information in relation to their minimum sampling ages. So we will never learn about how they define the market and how they conduct their sampling process. So from this discussion, we can see that even though there are some advantages of using this chronological age method to define the market, there are certain drawbacks with it. The most notable drawback is because there are so many regulations offered by different countries and organizations, researchers would tend to create inconsistent definitions for the market. We can see that pretty clearly from this frequency analysis here. But from my personal perspective, the advantages of this method somehow outweighs its drawback, because it is really a very simple and effective method for researchers to define the market and operationalize their research study. In terms of the key research themes, 6 key research themes were identified from the literature, and these key research themes are namely behavioral characteristics, market segmentations, travel constraints, travel decision-making process, tourism development issues, and other less popular topics. So among these 4 research themes, the behavioral characteristics focus on general behaviors of Chinese senior tourists, like their satisfaction rate, like their travel distance, the length of stay at destination, and so on and so forth. The market segmentation looks at the heterogeneous behaviors within the Chinese senior tourist market. And travel constraints focused on the barriers for seniors to participate in leisure travel. And the travel decision-making process investigates the internal and external factors that influence researchers' decision-making. Tourism development is an approach that is very much based on the analysis of behavioral characteristics. So once the researchers conducted a descriptive analysis of the behavioral characteristics of Chinese senior tourists, they would then offer a lot of their own recommendations for destination development and product development and so forth. In terms of methodological issues, we'll take a look at the underlying theories first. So the underlying theories of the Chinese research literature has a lot to do with their research themes. For example, as for those market segmentation papers, a lot of the researchers utilize the push and pull theory. And in terms of the travel constraint papers, some of the researchers utilize the hierarchy of leisure constraint model put forward by Crawford and Godbey, 1999. And as for travel decision-making papers, a few researchers utilize the theory of planned behavior for their research. In terms of the research approach, among the 113 articles, 97 articles utilize the quantitative research approach, 14 articles utilize the mixed method approach, and only 2 articles utilize the qualitative approach. So basically, the Chinese research literature are very quantitative oriented. In terms of the data collection methods, questionnaire survey, interview, and secondary data are the most popular data collection methods. As for the sampling methods, most of the researchers conducted their research study in economically developed regions in China. A lot of research was conducted in developed areas like Shanghai City, like Zhejiang Province and Guangdong Province. Those coastal areas in China and the most economically developed areas. And then another major drawback was spotted for the Chinese research literature, that is, a large proportion of the literature failed to say anything about their sampling methods. 86 articles did not mention anything about their sampling methods. Only 15 articles said that they employed the probability sampling methods. The rest of the articles utilized methods like snowball sampling, convenience sampling, and purposive sampling. And among the 15 articles that reported the usage of probability sampling methods, none of them provided a detailed description of the sampling procedure. So we never know if they really conducted a probability sampling, because they didn't tell us how they randomly selected their sample. In terms of the data analysis methods, the most popular quantitative data analysis methods are descriptive statistics. As we can see, they utilize that for like 96 times, and ANOVA and factor analysis. From my perspective, why there are so many descriptive statistics in this category is because that a lot of Chinese researchers only conducted descriptive studies for the Chinese senior tourist market. And as for the qualitative analysis methods, thematic analysis seem to be dominating in processing the qualitative data. So because their data analysis method are a reflection of the research design. Since so many Chinese researchers employ those rudimentary data analysis methods, we can kind of infer that their research design are somehow rudimentary. And then I also made a comparison between the Chinese research literature and the English research literature. So I also conducted a literature review for the English research literature. That's chapter 2 for my main thesis, and the Chinese literature review was chapter 3. The result is shown in this table, but briefly speaking, Western researchers started their research in the field of senior tourism market some 20 years earlier than Chinese researchers. Most of the researchers in both of these two types of literature utilized chronological age to define their respective target population. And both Chinese literature and English literature shared similar research themes and underlying theories. And most of the studies in both the Chinese and English research literature are quantitative ones. But the English research literature outperformed the Chinese research literature in terms of the research design and quality of the research. And that can be seen in the comparison between their sampling methods and data analysis methods. So most of the English research articles would utilize the probability sampling method, and most of the researchers that utilized this method provided a detailed description of how they conduct their sampling process. And that makes their research findings more valid than the Chinese researchers. And finally, we are here at the conclusions. So this literature review study reflects the thematic and methodological issues within the Chinese research literature. And it also identified some key gaps. For example, there is a large proportion of non-empirical articles. There is a lack of defining efforts for the market. And the sampling process of most of the Chinese researchers are problematic. Chinese researchers are more tended to utilize rudimentary data analysis methods and research designs. And 4 recommendations for future research agenda. So first of all, there is definitely a need to improve the sampling process, because it really because the sampling process really verifies how the quality is for the researchers' inferences made about the market. And then second, there is also a need to employ more sophisticated research designs. Third, there is a need to investigate the travel demands of seniors living in these less developed regions. As I mentioned before, most of the researchers conducted their research at economically developed regions. A investigation into less developed regions may produce very productive findings. And finally, Chinese researchers may shift their research focus from the quantitative research approach to the qualitative research approach, because as argued by several researchers like Patterson 2006, the qualitative research approach provides a more holistic analysis over the senior tourism market. And this is it for my presentation today. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you for that presentation. Interesting research, particularly considering the growing market, particularly in China, for Asian tourism. What I'd like to know further is, have you considered coming to a conceptual framework of some sort? Because your focus is more mainly on literature review.
Oh, yes. I think that's a very good question. And I ignore adding that part of information into this presentation. I do develop some conceptual frameworks, but because I think it's a little bit complicated, so I did not add it into this presentation. But as for me, I decided to take a look at the decision-making aspects of the Chinese senior tourists. So what are the unique factors that may contribute or not contribute to their decision-making process? And I also would like to employ the influence of the information communication technology and how it might potentially influence their decision-making process. I don't know if that answers your question.
Are you going to show it diagrammatically of some sort?
I didn't prepare one, so.
Would you have that in your thesis?
Yes, because I developed that. Conceptual research framework, but because I haven't completed the data analysis yet, so I think.
So when you say data analysis, do you have quantitative data?
I will be using quantitative data, and I will add. So I will make. I have already made a conceptual framework for the decision-making process of Chinese seniors. And I've completed my research data collection in China in this April, but haven't finished data analysis yet.
Right. Could you tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to research this area, and what do you think would be the impact of your study into the industry?
What do I think about?
How did you get inspired to do this research, and what do you think is the impact of your research onto the tourism industry?
Yes, so my inspiration is like, because in the past, the Chinese seniors are regarded as some frugal consumers. Like 20 years ago, when the country's economic development is not that promising, it's not that impressive. So many of the senior tourists. According to a research conducted by, I think, Huang and Xu, 2007. No, Xu et al. 2007. They said that some of the Chinese seniors do think that it is irresponsible to participate in leisure travel because that way they don't have time to do some family duties like child caring for their children and so on and so forth. But their opinions with regard to leisure travel is changing rapidly because of the economic growth. And as for nowadays, more and more people are willing to go out to see the world to fulfill their life. So I just want to. And that makes the Chinese senior tourist market a very unique market, and they're very different from the Western senior travelers. So I just would like to see if this research can identify some of the unique aspects in Chinese seniors' travel experience and things like that. And hopefully the contribution of this research study would be within that area, like telling people what are some of the unique circumstances faced by Chinese seniors. And in addition, more and more Chinese seniors are accepting the ICT technology, and how their acceptance of the ICT technology would impact their travel experience.
Any other questions?
Your comment about how few of these studies had empirical data is very interesting, because I remember a scoping study which was done about 15 years ago, the organisational theory work more generally, and the economic studies in that. So I recall only about 80% of economic studies in that domain So I guess my question is whether it might be worth looking at other scoping studies in other fields to see whether this problem of the huge volume of data-free publications is something specific to your area of work, or whether it's something which reappears in other domains, which might give you some clues to why.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your suggestions. Scoping studies. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look into that. Thank you.
That's one of my questions, but yeah, I can have the Google second one. Regarding the different definitions for senior tourists, what do you think? Because if you are revealed, okay, the definitions changes with time. What do you think brought about those different differences in the definitions?
Difference in the destinations.
In definitions.
In the definitions.
Yes.
I think the inconsistency in the definitions is almost inevitable if you utilize the chronological age for to define the market, because every country has its own regulation about what is the official retire age and what is the legal age to receive pensions and things like that. So I think it's acceptable, because even though it could create a inconsistency in the definitions, it is still worth it to do that because it's really simple and straightforward. And in the case of China, I think the legal retirement age in China is absolutely a good reference for researchers to develop their own definitions for the market. And does that answer your question?
Because I was just thinking, considering you said the aging population is changing from time to time, it's getting older, yes, probably it was defined previously based on that age bracket as a date. So as the population of the aging group is growing, so that's why the definition is changing.
Yeah.
So probably the definition changed with the trend of the the age brackets.
But for now, most of the studies are cross-sectional ones, so they're not longitudinal ones, and therefore I think it's kind of acceptable. So even though the definitions may be changing in the future, you still know that during that time frame when you conducted your research, the definition for the market is this one, and not that one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Dr. Hall.
You mentioned quantitative and qualitative research. Can you explain a bit about what exactly you're planning to do?
My plan to do the quantitative research.
You mentioned both quantitative and qualitative in your.
So I think I said I will do a quantitative research for the study.
Can you explain a bit?
What particular aspect do you want me to explain?
What kind of quantitative approaches are you going to use?
So you mean the paradigm of inquiry, or?
Yes. So who is your sample? What kind of? Are you going to do it with individuals, with
I'm going
agencies?
to. As for the data collection method, I will use the questionnaire survey to sampling some Chinese seniors to see their attitude toward the travel decision making aspect.
Sample size?
Sample size is some 600. I already completed that data collection in April. Yeah, Dr. Wang.
I'm a supervisor, so I feel I need the support to Tao. What happened is the Tao did a presentation based on his review of senior tourism in China, research in China. He has a separate chapter about consumption framework and how he developed different constructs and how that his consumption framework look like. At this moment, Tao finished the first stage of primary research and Tao stage of 600 sample size, and there's another second stage of primary research. the suggestion is in October.
Yeah.
And so far, in terms of primary research stage, it performed really well. It's hard work to collect the data, even though a lot of research is collected in Shanghai, Zhejiang, and Guangzhou, as in the primary research the publications there. And Tao tries so hard to collect data from other areas. Believe me, there's a big campaign on the WeChat trying to help Tao to raise the response rate and all sorts of ways to get the people to reply in other areas. But economic developed areas certainly generate more people able to travel.
Yeah.
And in terms of review, today Tao presented is exactly what we have done the first part, to provide the context, how the research has been done in the Chinese context. Because what happened is Tao didn't say the first stage of literature review is how the senior travel is being done in the English literature. After it has been researched, there's literature research you can base on. Second stage, you look at the Chinese literature. And then third stage, you look at the consumption framework, what exactly you want to do. So it's clear stage. Today's presentation is based on
the chapter 3 of my thesis, and there is a chapter 4 for the conceptual framework and the result of the research. So,
can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So you collected your data, some of your data. Have you had a chance to look at it?
You mean the data I collected from China? Yeah, I took a look at it.
So I've just been nosy, really. Because obviously, an aging population structure is not one that's just familiar to China, it's familiar to many economies. So I'm just wondering how generalizable your findings are to other countries with aging populations in terms of the senior travel market. So I think it's a really, really big, important issue for many economies, which we just really haven't tapped. It's hugely lucrative. So how sort of generalisable do you think your findings are?
In relation
UK,
to,
for example.
I think, well, the results would not be that general. For the UK example, well, first of all, I didn't conducted a research for the UK market, so I have
I'm just thinking, are the Chinese senior tourists, are they very different in their demands? Are there any particular characteristics that they are?
Yeah, because most of the Chinese seniors, I think for them to travel internationally, the language barrier would be a big issue. So in terms of outbound travel, they're more likely to attend those packaged tours to other countries. But if you're talking about domestic travel, then I think senior travelers in China nowadays are very much alike travelers in the developed economies. They would travel independently, but as for outbound travel, they'll be quite different.
Yeah. Who said package tourism is better? Question we can do. Are there any further last questions?
Yeah, one. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. But I was trying to find out whether your study is focused on only domestic travel or international travel, or is in both. Because my argument would be that the attitude towards domestic travel, it might be quite different from the attitude toward international travel. So in your study, are you trying to find out these kind of differences in the attitude?
Yeah, that is a very good question, Dr. Banning. As for the current research, I would mainly focus on the domestic travel aspect. But I also had a very simple question in my questionnaire to ask whether they intend to participate in outbound travel. And I think that's the only bit that has something to do with outbound travel with my research. Yeah, so mainly focused on domestic travel.
Okay, so can we?
Yeah, thank you so much.